Good evening, and welcome back to another gentle journey through history. I'm your cozy narrator, and tonight we're settling in with a story that might surprise you, one about calendars and conflicts, about workers and governments, and about how a simple choice of dates became a statement that echoes through American culture to this day. As summer winds down and September approaches, millions of Americans prepare for their final long weekend before autumn truly arrives. Labor Day weekend brings barbecues, beach trips, and the bittersweet end of summer vacation. But have you ever wondered why we celebrate our workers in September, when most of the world honors them in May? The answer isn't just about scheduling, it's about revolution, fear, and a deliberate choice that reveals something profound about American identity. Picture this. It's May 1st, 1886, and across America, hundreds of thousands of workers are walking off their jobs. In Chicago, New York, Detroit, and dozens of other cities, the streets fill with determined faces carrying banners that read, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. This wasn't just a strike. It was a coordinated uprising demanding something we now take for granted, the 8-hour workday. The air that spring was electric with possibility and tension. For decades, American workers had endured 12, 14, even 16-hour days in factories where the air was thick with cotton dust or metal shavings, where children as young as 10 operated dangerous machinery, where a moment's inattention could cost a finger, a hand, or a life. The Industrial Revolution had brought unprecedented prosperity to America, but that wealth flowed upward while those who created it barely survived. The choice of May 1st for this great strike was no accident. International socialist and anarchist movements had been building toward this moment for years, and they chose the traditional European Spring Festival Day, May Day, as their moment of action. There's something poetic about that choice, isn't there? Spring, the season of renewal and growth, becoming the moment when workers would demand their own chance to bloom. But what happened next would haunt American politics for generations. On May 3rd, at the McCormick Reaper Works in Chicago, police opened fire on strikers, killing several workers. The next evening, May 4th, a protest rally was called at Haymarket Square. The gathering was peaceful until police moved to disperse the crowd. Then someone, to this day we don't know who, threw a bomb into the police ranks. 7 officers died and 4 workers were killed in the chaos that followed. The Haymarket affair, as it came to be known, sent shockwaves through American society. Suddenly, the push for workers' rights became entangled with fears of foreign anarchists and revolutionary violence. The newspapers, largely owned by the same industrialists who opposed the 8-hour day, painted the entire labor movement with the brush of terrorism and foreign radicalism. 8 men were arrested for the bombing, though the evidence against most was thin at best. 4 were executed, 1 committed suicide in jail, and 3 were later pardoned by Illinois Governor John Peter Altgeld, who called their trial a travesty of justice. But the damage was done. May Day, which workers around the world would come to celebrate as International Workers' Day, was forever linked in the American mind with violence, radicalism, and foreign influence. This is where our story takes an interesting turn, because the response to Haymarket reveals something essential about the American character. Rather than embrace the international workers' movement, American leaders, both in government and in the growing labor unions, began to chart a different course. They wanted to honor workers, yes, but they wanted to do it in a distinctly American way. free from the revolutionary associations of May Day. The seeds of this alternative were planted just 6 years later, in 1892, during another labor conflict that would reshape American politics. The Pullman strike began in the company town of Pullman, Illinois, where railroad car manufacturer George Pullman had created what he believed was a model community. Workers lived in company houses, shopped at company stores, and sent their children to company schools. But when economic depression hit in 1893, Pullman cut wages while keeping rents and prices high, trapping workers in a cycle of debt. The American Railway Union, led by a young firebrand named Eugene Debs, called for a boycott of all Pullman cars. Soon, railroad traffic across the nation ground to a halt as workers refused to handle trains with Pullman cars attached. The strike was remarkably peaceful and well organized, but it threatened the very arteries of American commerce. President Grover Cleveland faced a dilemma that would define his presidency and shape American labor relations for decades to come. Under pressure from railroad owners and with the excuse of protecting mail delivery, Cleveland sent federal troops to break the strike. The violence that followed left dozens dead and hundreds injured, and Eugene Debs was imprisoned for defying a federal injunction. But here's where the story becomes fascinating from a political perspective. Cleveland, a Democrat who had just used federal force against striking workers, found himself in an impossible position as the 1894 midterm elections approached. The backlash from working-class voters was swift and brutal. Democrats lost more House seats than in any election in American history up to that point. It was in this moment of political desperation that the idea of a September Labor Day began to take serious shape in Washington. Cleveland needed to make amends with American workers, but he couldn't embrace May Day without seeming to endorse the radicalism associated with Haymarket. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Create an American workers' holiday. Separate from international movements that would honor labor without the revolutionary baggage. The story of how September became America's Labor Day is really about a man whose name deserves to be better remembered, Peter J. McGuire, a carpenter and labor organizer who would later help found the American Federation of Labor. McGuire's story embodies the American dream in ways that might surprise us today. Born to Irish immigrant parents in New York's Lower East Side, he had witnessed firsthand the brutal conditions that drove workers to organize. But unlike the European socialists who looked to class revolution, McGuire believed in working within the American system to achieve reform. He was in many ways the perfect architect for an American labor holiday, radical enough to understand workers' suffering, pragmatic enough to know that lasting change required mainstream acceptance. The first Labor Day celebration that McGuire helped organize took place on Tuesday, September 5th, 1882 in New York City. The choice of early September was practical rather than political. It fell halfway between Independence Day and Thanksgiving, providing a pleasant break in the late summer heat while avoiding the revolutionary associations of May Day. About 10,000 workers marched from City Hall to Union Square, taking unpaid leave for what they called a working man's holiday. What's remarkable about that first Labor Day is how thoroughly American it was in character. Unlike May Day demonstrations in Europe, which often featured red flags and revolutionary songs, the New York celebration included patriotic music, speeches about American values, and a distinctly festive rather than confrontational atmosphere. The workers didn't demand the overthrow of capitalism. They asked for recognition as valuable members of American society. This American approach to labor organizing reflected deeper cultural currents that distinguished the United States from Europe. European workers, bound by centuries of rigid class structure, often saw their struggle in revolutionary terms, the overthrow of an entire social order. But American workers, despite facing similar economic hardships, maintained a faith in the possibility of advancement within the existing system. They wanted a bigger piece of the American pie, not a completely different meal. The September Labor Day celebrations spread gradually across the country throughout the 1880s, with different cities adapting the concept to their own needs and cultures. In some places, it became primarily a parade and picnic. In others, it featured speeches by labor leaders and politicians. But everywhere, it maintained its distinctly American character, patriotic, optimistic, and focused on incremental progress rather than revolutionary change. The choice of the September date, rather than May, was never explicitly stated in the congressional debates, but the reasoning was clear to everyone involved. May Day had become irredeemably associated with foreign radicalism and violence. September, by contrast, represented a homegrown American tradition of honoring workers within the framework of American values and institutions. This distinction would prove prophetic. While May Day celebrations in other countries often became flashpoints for political conflict, American Labor Day evolved into something more complex and ultimately more enduring, a holiday that honored work itself as an American virtue rather than workers as a revolutionary class. This subtle difference would shape American labor relations for the next century. By 1894, when Cleveland found himself desperately needing to repair his relationship with American workers, over half the states had already recognized some form of Labor Day holiday. The groundwork had been laid by more than a decade of peaceful, patriotic celebrations that had proven workers could organize and demonstrate without threatening social stability. Cleveland's decision to make Labor Day a federal holiday was announced just 6 days after the end of the Pullman strike, with legislation rushed through Congress in record time. The speed was remarkable. The bill passed the House unanimously and sailed through the Senate with only one dissenting vote. But this rapid consensus wasn't just about political expedience. It reflected a broader American consensus that workers deserved recognition, even if there was disagreement about what form that recognition should take. The establishment of September Labor Day represented more than just political calculation. It embodied a distinctly American approach to social change that continues to shape our politics today. Where European labor movements often embraced revolutionary rhetoric and class warfare, American workers and their leaders chose a different path, one that sought dignity and justice within the framework of American democracy rather than through its overthrow. The international implications of America's Labor Day choice became clearer as the 20th century unfolded. During the Cold War, May Day became a symbol of communist solidarity, with massive parades in Moscow's Red Square showcasing military might and ideological unity. American Labor Day, by contrast, evolved into something much more low-key, backyard. Barbecues, retail sales, and the unofficial end of summer vacation. This difference wasn't accidental. It reflected fundamentally different philosophies about the relationship between workers and the state. Communist May Day celebrations presented workers as servants of a revolutionary ideology, marching in lockstep toward a predetermined future. American Labor Day presented workers as individuals choosing to come together in celebration of shared values and achievements. The genius of the September choice was that it allowed American workers to claim their rights without rejecting American identity. They could demand better wages, safer working conditions, and more dignity without being painted as enemies of their own country. This created space for the pragmatic, incremental progress that has characterized American labor relations for over a century. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you'll think differently about that long weekend in September. What seems like a simple holiday carries within it the DNA of American democracy, the belief that ordinary people, working together within democratic institutions, can achieve extraordinary change. The choice of September over May wasn't just about avoiding foreign influence. It was about affirming faith in the American experiment itself. In choosing September, America chose evolution over revolution, inclusion over exclusion, and pragmatism over ideology. These choices shaped not just how we celebrate workers, but how we understand ourselves as Americans. And in a world still grappling with the tensions between individual rights and collective action, between national identity and global solidarity, the story of Labor Day offers lessons that remain remarkably relevant. Sweet dreams. And remember, sometimes the most important choices are the ones that seem most ordinary at the time.